talking about, since I found this video, I was sorting videos for the Twin City Model Railroad Museum, and I put out the video of the SD80. I don't know if you saw that. That was the highest horsepower single engine production diesel ever built.
Yeah, I learned a lot on that.
Yeah, 5,000.
Can I ask, why don't we have a bunch more?
20 cylinders. It worked well, but and then General Motors, as we're going to look at some pictures today, but then General Motors and GE came out with a 6,000 horsepower locomotive, and the railroads tried them, and they just, number one, it's too much power in one engine, and the engines, they started to have engine problems. They were just trying to get too much out of an engine that size. And so basically they've all gone back to the 4,400, around 4,400 horsepower.
Right. Is that a Baldwin?
Yeah, this is a Baldwin. I'll put this picture up. It's better. Yeah, Baldwin. Basically it's you know, they've thought big, and so this is a B. It's actually a 2. There's 2 axles, and then it's D and D and then 2. Or I guess it'd be 4D, D2. And it'd be the same as
oh yeah, 4.
Basically, it's like the underframe of a like a GG1, except different drive, but it's, and they had 2 1,500 horsepower locomotives, or the diesel engines inside. So it was 3,000 horsepower, which for 1950 is a lot. And but basically it's like that's like 4 F3s right there.
Well, it's a big boy, right? 4884.
Yeah. It's like a big boy. I mean, they were thinking steam. And so they and then they sort of copied General Motors, and they called this the baby face car body, because they had to do something a little different. So they made the windows bigger and the nose lower, and so they called it the baby face car body. And then along the roof, you see that what looks like a handrail is actually Pennsylvania early on was using induction radio, so lower frequency radio. They were one of the first to use radios in their locomotives, but it was low frequency, so they had to have big long antennas. So, and here's
So are each of those drive wheels driven?
The first 2 axles are just as I understand it are not powered, and then the next 8 axles are powered with traction motors, and then the last 2 are not powered.
Okay.
So like Craig said, it's a 4884.
So you've got 8 traction motors.
Yes.
Driving 16 wheels.
Yes. And
okay.
then on each end there's a truck just to carry kind of a sort of like a steam engine. You have a lead truck and then a following truck to pull the engine around. It's so big.
Now is the B unit also driven?
Yes. Yes. So so you have 2 units. This is basically, like I said, it's exactly the same as having 4 F units. The problem is the Baldwin, these were big and complicated, and Baldwin did not standardize on the internals. So each guy that put them together kind of ran the wires the way he did, and the plumbing was different. And it was like steam engines. It was the way they built steam engines. So they couldn't quite, they were the biggest builder of steam engines, but they just couldn't make the transition. They also got into that trap, like that you've got this great business going, and if you start a new line, you're going to be eating your own lunch, as they used to say. And they in the business world, when I was taking business courses, they call it the Atari trap. Do you remember Atari video games? They had 97% of the market, and they kept cranking them out, and they were selling them and everything. And there were some advances coming in, but they said, well, we don't want to change anything because we're doing so well. Well, Xbox came in, which I think is that Microsoft? Anyway, Xbox came in and basically wiped them out in 2 years. So,
Just as an aside, while I think about it, this is completely off the subject, but there's a fellow here in the building. He's 79 years old, just sweetest guy. He's originally from Pennsylvania. And I was asking about what he did for a living. He was an accountant and working for a manufacturing company. And I said, "What did you manufacture?" He says, "Well, we made cabs and front hoods for diesel locomotives." I said, "Did you make them for EMD or for General Electric?" He about fell off his chair. He had no idea, had any idea who built locomotives, but I didn't find out that much more about it. But apparently that was something subcontracted. That's what he did for a living.
yeah, it's very complicated. I have a cousin who married a guy who works for the Navy, that doing those compound curves like on that locomotive, it's very complicated to do.
Oh, I think so.
Because you're working in 3 dimensions. You know, rolling a piece of steel like the rear part of the hood just in 2 dimensions, if you will, is pretty straightforward. But when you have to do 3 dimensions and get it right, it's very complicated. So here's a new one, builder's photo. This is Seaboard bought some of them, and everybody bought Baldwin stuff. They thought Baldwin was great stuff, and the engines were good. They had the De La Verge diesel, a big old slow engine, and but they were good. But it was just they had kind of they weren't standardized, and so that was a problem. National de Mexico bought a bunch of them, and they ran them a long time because they've got pretty good mechanics down there keeping stuff going. Now, what's that behind? Craig, can you see what that is? That's an alco, isn't it? Modified alco behind the.
They did some morphodites down there in Mexico, where they would just put together whatever leftover pieces they had. But that looks like something like that, because that hood it starts out looking like an early GE, but then you can see that it's a six axle locomotive. But that low hood is way lower than you would expect.
It's got Fairbanks Morse trucks on it. So yeah, you're right. So here's another one of the Seaboard units, big monsters, So, and then they really went nuts with this one. This is the same underframe, but they had 8 750 horsepower V8s in it. So they bought smaller V8s, and they're going to put 8 of them in here. And I mean, now your complexity is just, But anyway, so they only put 4 of them in. They tested it, and it was just so. I mean, the maintenance would be just crazy. So anyway, they had this one, and here's the roof of that centipede. You can see how it's a straight 8 diesel, and you can see the turbocharger on the end there and the exhaust, and De La Verge engine, big old. It's slow moving. It was a marine engine, 4-stroke, and so there's the engine. Pensy bought a bunch of them. They ran them quite a while.
My understanding is that Baldwin's didn't MU with anything else. Is that?
That was a problem. Yes, they had some kind of a strange electro-pneumatic system that they, in theory, you're supposed to be able to do it, but it didn't work. So there's another the NDM. There's a couple of models. Somebody makes a model of it.
Boy, that would be a wide curve.
Oh yeah. That's that's another problem with engines this size. So there are only a few railroads that bought them. So anyway, that's the Baldwin, the first high horsepower.
Ross, was the point of that engine to not have multiple engines and multiple crews?
Yeah, that was actually one of the things they were fighting, because the union said, well, if you got 4 diesels, you got to have 4 crews. Well, it was just
Probably.
Okay, so here is the alco. Now this is about 1963, 64, and Union Pacific had this guy who was the chief motor power officer who who liked big engines, and he wanted to, because they needed so much horsepower pulling all these trains over the Sherman Hill and over the Wasatch Mountains. So they asked each GE, Alco, and EMD to come up with 5,000 horsepower engines. And so this has two, basically it's two Century 620 or 428, 428s. Yeah, it's 5,500 horsepower. And the way they did it is they took 4 regular trucks, and then they put a span bolster across here like this, and then a big pin there would hold the works together. So they rode rough, and they built the fuel tank right into the frame. So they had a the radiators are here, the air intake is over here, and so the diesel sits in there, and then the generator would be there. And so they built 1 B unit and
2. And 1 B unit and 2 A units.
2 A units. And here's an A unit running. It's kind of a weird looking beast on the UP. And they ran them for a while. But that's pretty brave, because they did have mechanical problems with them. It putting 2 engines in one, it really increases the complexity a lot. So, and apparently they didn't ride very well at all with that span bolster.
So does the electrical cabinet get to be as big as my bedroom?
Well, there were 2 electrical cabinets. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
they didn't even have them together then.
Well, there would be the control cabinet up front, but the generator and cabinet, there would be one here and one there, and then the big electrical control.
Jeez.
Yeah, it'd be a big electrical control cabinet too, because everything was relay.
Massive. Yeah.
Yeah. And so here's that's a General Motors DD35B. There's the Alco. Now, that's a builder's photo, so it looks a little better there. They only sold the 3, and they ran them, I don't know, 5-10 years maybe, and then they typical Alcos, they over inject when they start. So
Yeah.
so there's an A and a B running. The other thing they found is they got a little minor problem on one engine. Now you got 2 engines really out of work.
Engines tied
So-
up. Yeah, right.
So now there's the
There's the whole set.
an A, a B, and an A, and the cabs are facing in, so they must have put something else on the outside to run it.
Probably
So-
put an RS-27 or something on there.
Sure.
Just ran them long hood forward.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You wouldn't see anything.
150 feet.
Yeah. Yeah. So they got some miles out of them, but
He's facing forward.
there's a guy who's got some serious model. There's an ABA
That's what I was just thinking.
in HO. Wow.
Yeah.
And if those are brass, that's an expensive lash up there. I'd be afraid to run it. Okay, so this is a looks like a GP35 ahead of 2 of them.
Yeah.
Did those have electric brakes too?
I don't know. No, actually you can see the brake cylinders, so they must have had manual regular air brakes.
Okay.
Here's the brake cylinder right there. I see they do have roller bearings too, so.
Those sandboxes on the side. No, nobody else.
Yeah, that's
did
what I
that.
was wondering.
Well, actually, the DDA-40Xs had them, didn't they?
Yeah,
Exterior sandbox.
convenient.
Yeah.
Except you got to fill 8 of them, but. So. Okay, that's Alco's contribution to the project.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
so this is General Electric, same concept. They put 2 U25Bs in one big cabinet or one big hood.
Yeah.
And of course that didn't leave them much room for the cab, so not a lot of collision protection. Of course they got big beams in there and stuff like that, but apparently it didn't ride well. And Carl Rasmussen and I were down in North Platte in when was that, 1970, and we're walking around. I mean, I think about it now, I'm just anyway, we were walking around the engine terminal, and these guys brought this one, the number 32. I'll never forget that. And they got down off the engine. They said, "Would you like that engine?" And Carl said, "Sure." And he says, "You can have it."
Get the hell out of here.
They didn't like it. So anyway, but that's interesting. I never noticed that. They actually had a retractable coupler in the bottom too. So
Oh, that's where it disappeared too. Okay, I couldn't see a door.
yeah.
Yeah.
So oh, this is all the GEs. This is General Electric 6,000 horsepower AC, the AC 6,000.
Yeah.
And you can see that they just kept, there was basically the same car body and frame and everything as the regular 4,400 one, but they obviously need a little more radiator on
That's
that.
the size of an aircraft carrier back
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah, because I mean, the engines are, 35% efficient, but you still got to get rid of 65% of the heat. So it's and you can tell if you ever see a CSX one. I don't think any of the ACs are running around, but the CSX, the alternating current high horsepower models, instead of this being blue, they had a blue highlight around yellow lettering. That's how you knew they were the AC models.
Okay.
So they could tell the guys. Oh, we're back to here's a U50. There's a model, and of course, when the model builders come out with these things, so they made them in Santa Fe and they made them in Chessie. They obviously didn't have those, but
I was going to ask them.
Great Northern.
Great Northern, they didn't have them, did they?
No. And Santa Fe passenger. Now that would be a hell of a passenger train you'd need that thing for. So anyway, here's another U50. Oh, this is the standard. No, actually, those are the 6,000 horsepower General Electrics, which they built some of 6,000 horsepower AC. You can see the big radiators on them, but they just found it's just too much power. Even though they can handle it's just too much power for an engine. It's better to standardize. So here we're back to, now this is a U50C. Now you remember they had the turbines, the big gas turbines. Well, General Electric said, because they raised the horsepower on their engine, the FDL engine, it used to be 16 cylinders were 2,500 horsepower. Well, then they got it to 12 cylinders, 2,500 horsepower. So they said, well, we'll take the underframes from the big blow turbines, if you remember those, and they put 12 cylinder here, the radiator 12 cylinder, and they're pretty good engines. The problem was that at this time in the mid 60s, General Electric fell in love with aluminum wiring. And they were selling these motors with aluminum wiring, and everything was aluminum wiring. And aluminum works okay in buildings where you fasten it and you tighten it once and you never tighten it again. You have to put a compound on it and everything. You never touch it again, because if you go back and screw with it again, it's going to work itself loose. And of course, in a locomotive that's bouncing around the track, they had fires, and it just, I remember at the power plant, because we'd gotten some of these, they had installed some of those, and you'd go up there and the motor had locked up, and there was this molten aluminum pouring out of the ends of the motor, so as Craig Rasmussen would say, is that a problem? Yeah, it is. So anyway, here's one when they were newer, and these things were terrible, did not ride well at all either. So, because you got the cab way ahead of the axle, so the pin with the axle. So
not only that, but you got at that time a lot of wheels.
Yeah.
And the track wasn't that high.
Oh.
In size track, and then I bet you still had a whole bunch of joints.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no way that cab could stay in one place.
And if you hit anything, so rarely were they, you know, once they started running these things, they never put them in the lead. Now, Southern Pacific bought some too, because they still had, you know, they needed a lot of power to go over Donner Pass, and for the hill, which is east of LA, going on the main line over to Yuma, Arizona. There's a big hill there, and here's the back end of it. So there's a couple of, so this is the U50 BB. This one has the two BB trucks. This is the U50C. So this is this one has two 16-cylinder engines producing 5,000 horsepower. This has two 12-cylinder engines producing 5,000 horsepower.
Notice on the original U50 that the pilot is not connected to the car body, and it is on the U50C.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, because that had to swing around like a articulated steam engine.
Yeah.
And so here's their the GE 6000 AC 6000 CW, and they work better than the EMD ones, but it's still just, it's a lot of horsepower. It's really testing things. So here's some in down in Australia, Roby, hauling probably 5 miles of ore trains. They haul huge trains down there because they don't have grade crossings, and it's really good track. And so, and they have to haul this ore, Northwest Territories. They haul it, you know, 70, 80, 100 miles, and to the coast. And out there, they're still working with pure ore. It's about 60% ore, whereas as in the United States and in northern Minnesota, they ran up out of the pure ore a long time ago. Fortunately, those two guys at the University of Minnesota developed taconite, because that's kept that industry going for about 40 years. So here's 3 of them together, 15,000 horsepower. This is these are the U50 BBs. That must have been a publicity. Oh, there's the number 32. Gee, that's Carl's engine right there.
Ah, yeah.
Here's a 6,000 horse CSX engine.